This morning's psalm finds us in Psalm number 74. If you'd like, go ahead and find your way there. We'll be reading through it in just a moment. But as we're working our way through the Psalms, we notice certain themes, certain ideas that keep repeating. But we also maybe have started to notice that there are certain patterns, certain types of Psalms that tend to go together. We had Psalms that praised the Messiah back in the 20s and early 30s. Now we have Psalms of lament, of woes, of wisdom, in a sense that as we think about who God is, we reflect and respond accordingly to him. Even in the Psalms of lament, like this morning in Psalm number 74, we find the psalmist thinking about who God is, and that is our hope, not our present situation. That's why the early editors, whoever they were, who began to assemble these books of songs together, placed them in the particular order they're in. Psalm 74 is part of the third book. The third book began with the Psalm of Asaph and continues. Psalm number 75, next week when we look at it on Tuesday, also a Psalm of Asaph. Somebody's putting together a collection of like-minded songs. So Psalm number 74. If you're ready, let's go ahead and read through the whole thing. And again, as we do so often, hit some high points along the way. O God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? Remember your congregation, which you have purchased of old, which you have redeemed to be the tribe of your heritage. Remember Mount Zion, where you have dwelt. Direct your steps to the perpetual ruins. The enemy has destroyed everything in the sanctuary. Your foes have roared in the midst of your meeting place. They set up their own signs for signs. They were like those who swing axes in the forest of trees, and all its carved wood they broke down with hatchets and hammers. They set your sanctuary on fire. They profaned the dwelling place of your name, bringing it down to the ground. They said to themselves, we will utterly subdue them. They burned all the meeting places of God in the land. We do not see our signs. There is no longer any prophet, and there is none among us who knows how long. How long, O Lord, or O God, is the foe to scoff? Is the enemy to revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand, your right hand? Take it from the fold of your garment and destroy them. Yet God, my King, is from of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. You split open springs and brooks. You dried up ever-flowing streams. Yours is the day, yours also the night. You have established the heavenly lights and the sun. You have fixed all the boundaries of the earth. You have made summer and winter. Remember this, O Lord, how the enemy scoffs and a foolish people reviles your name. Do not deliver the souls of your dove to the wild beasts. Do not forget the life of your poor forever. Have regard for the covenant, for the dark places of the land are full of the habitations of violence. Let not the downtrodden turn back in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Arise, O God, defend your cause. Remember how the foolish scoff at you all the day. Do not forget the clamor of your foes, the uproar of those against you, which goes up continually. Now, the context of this particular psalm seems to be the destruction of the temple in 586, after the Babylonians had finally conquered Jerusalem. Many of the leaders had already been taken off into captivity, but in 586, they captured the city of Jerusalem at its heart, and they destroyed the temple. The temple that Solomon had built nearly 400 years earlier is gone. It's in ruins, and the people's emotional, spiritual connection to God and all that that temple represents is destroyed with it. And the psalmist, I don't know if you picked up on it as I read through it, repeatedly calls on God to remember. The issue here is not did God forget something, not to remember it intellectually, as in, where did I put that? Let me remember. But remember in the sense of reflect on and honor your covenant. The covenant, of course, is going all the way back to Moses, going all the way back to Abraham. The covenant is this idea that God will, as he promised Abraham, bless those who bless his people and curse those who will curse his people. And so the author is calling on God, are you aware of what's happening down here? The answer, of course, is yes. Now the psalmist wants God to respond, to react, to restore his people. Not just so they may be comfortable, but so that God's glory might be acknowledged once more. And so here we go. Let's think about this psalm in light of this idea of God, please remember your covenant. Oh God, why do you cast us off forever? Seems to me that God has rejected them. And now if he has in one sense turned his back on them, just as he had promised that other part of the covenant, that if they kept the law, God would bless them. If they obeyed it, they would stay in the land. But if you don't, you won't. And God has sent them out of the land, keeping that part of the covenant. So in one sense, the rhetorical question, why do you cast us off forever? He knows the answer. Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? He knows the answer. But he wants God to remember, verse 2. Remember your congregation, the one which you have purchased of old. Bought, redeemed is the language there. And I love the language there in the middle of verse 2. Which you have redeemed to be the tribe of your heritage. God has a tribe. His people. The one he's bought, not by birth, but he has purchased and placed them into his tribe himself. And so remember your congregation, verse 2 begins. Remember Mount Zion, the location of the temple, the place where God's people go to meet with God. Remember that, where you have dwelt. In case he doesn't, direct your steps to the perpetual ruins. Look what they've done to your sanctuary. Your foes roared in the midst of your meeting place, and they set up their own signs. Like those who swing axes in a forest of trees, and they cut it down. They set your sanctuary, verse 7, on fire. They profaned the dwelling place of your name, and they brought it to the ground. They've besmirched your reputation, God. They said to themselves, we'll utterly subdue them. And they burned all the meeting places of God in the land. Crushing God's people by crushing God's reputation. We don't see signs, verse 9. There's no longer any prophets. There's no one to tell us how long this will last. Now, of course, there was. Jeremiah told them, and they ignored him. But once they go into the wilderness, drug off into Babylon, there seems to be no prophets with them for a brief interim until Ezekiel shows up. And then later, Daniel and other prophets that came up during the time of the exile or when they returned. But right now, they're longing for a sign, and there are none. So, rhetorical question, verse 10. How long is the foe to scoff? How long will you let him get away with it? Is the name or your enemy going to revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hands, your right hand, the hand of power? Take it from the fold of your garment and destroy them. Now, the fold of the garment, some of you might be thinking Napoleon with his hands in his jacket. I think a better analogy for us today in 2021 is his hands in his pocket. He's laid back. He's relaxed. He's not on guard. He's not about to do anything. Take it out and destroy them. Yet, verse 12 begins, God, my King, is from of old. We worship a God who's been here far longer than this enemy, and he'll be here long after them. He's been working salvation in the midst of the earth. This God that we call and trust upon, even today, 2,500 years after this psalm was written, still the song speaks to us. Because we need to remember that he is the King. And he's been saving people from of old for a long time. He knows what he's doing. He's the one who divided the sea by your might. Genesis chapter 1. He broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. He crushed the heads of Leviathan. He gave them as food for animals in the wilderness. He split open springs and rocks so that they could get water from a rock as they traveled through the wilderness. You dried up ever-flowing streams. He dried the Jordan as well as the Red Sea so they could cross on dry ground. He is his day, it's his night. He's established the heavenly lights and the sun. So again, language of the creation through all this. You set the boundaries of the earth. You've made summer and winter. He's established the seasons. He's sovereign over all that he's made, is the psalmist's point. Remember this, O Lord. There's another call to remember. How the enemy scoffs and how a foolish people revile your name. Lord, don't forget the covenant. Do not deliver the soul of your dove to the wild beast. Do not forget the life of your poor forever. Here's the key. Have regard for the covenant, verse 20. For the dark places of the land are full of the habitations of violence. Remember the covenant, Lord. Our hope is bound up in God keeping his word. What he promised to do from of old, he will do in eternity in the future. Let not the downtrodden be put to shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Arise, O God. Establish your cause. Defend your cause. Prove that you are the God of this universe once more. Let the downtrodden turn back in shame, or let not the downtrodden turn back in shame. Let the poor and needy praise your name. Arise, defend your name. Remember how the foolish scoff at you all day. Don't forget the clamor of your foes, the uproar of those who are against you, which goes up forever. God knows these things. The author, the psalmist, is trying to bring himself in line with God's will and depending, counting on, even in the midst of struggles and turmoil, that God is in fact sovereign and that God has made a covenant. And our hope is that he'll keep it, if not now, one day in the future, and we'll be with him, we'll dwell with him in the safety of his presence for the rest of eternity. May you find your hope in God, and may the words of his Bible, the words of the scriptures, the promises of the covenant give you hope regardless of what confronts you today.